Hi and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma Creagh and I'm chatting with director Shelly Love, whose film A Bump Along the Way is in cinemas on the 11th of October. Thank you so much for chatting with us. We're delighted to just be able to do this because I watched Bump Along the Way last night with my mum. I loved it. It was really, really sweet. So first I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your own background. So you're an artist and a choreographer and a filmmaker. So that's a really interesting mix. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into it?
Yeah. So I trained as a contemporary dancer originally, and worked as a dance artist, as we're known, through my 20s. I lived in Brighton and then in London, and so yes, I'm a choreographer, but ex-dancer. In the sense that I'm not still dancing. I'm not going to pretend to still be dancing. Basically I made a lot of dance on screen works. So I've had a lot of commissions from places like Sadler's Wells, Circus Space and the Arts Council England. So a lot of my early film works that you might see on my website are me working as an artist filmmaker, and the works are kind of specially commissioned to work with physical performers. Usually the films are kind of arise from a situation. So for instance, I'd be asked to come and work with 15 circus performers at a circus school, given 2 weeks to work with them to devise, write and then direct a screen-based work. So a lot of my sort of earlier art work is made through quite a different process. So that's my sort of background, and then I built up a showreel really of art films, lots of short films, and then I directed music videos and a number of commercial films, and then have been looking to move into drama for quite some time, having directed about 30 jobs. I call them jobs rather than films. So so that's really how I came into directing drama, from the weird end of things.
It's a very interesting thing, but I suppose they're both such visual art forms, you know, and just wondering as well, personally, just with your own background, how do you feel almost like body language and the physicality affects the emotion of a piece?
Well, I think I have I suppose I have a natural eye. Like, my eye is naturally led. We're all different at in the way that we receive information, but I know that I pick up on a lot of subtle details and moments of, small gestures and things, and I suppose in my head they're still choreography. So I don't think I'm answering your question. What was your question?
Oh yeah, just your own kind of sense of the physicality. Like, are you tempted to step in and forensically block, just with your own background, the performers on a camera, or would you let things flow a little bit? Yeah,
well, I think I didn't go to film school, and I learned everything on the job very instinctively. I've also been a performer myself, and an actor, quietly, don't tell anyone. I guess, yes, I do. My strength is in, if I'm allowed to direct in the way that I want to direct, if it works for everyone in the room, I would probably choose, yes, to walk through and block it physically, because that's the way I sort of instinctively feel through the scene. I know I'm not the only one to do that, so I think some people are more heady than others. I'm more of a physical being, and it's something that sometimes I think some people might find it a little bit odd. But I really believe in it. I think however you work, you should work with your strengths, and that's something that works for me.
And can you tell me a little bit about how you got attached to A Bump Along the Way?
So I was living in London for sort of 18 years, working as a director, and I'm originally from the Highlands in Scotland, but my parents are from Northern Ireland, and they had moved back to their hometown in Bangor. And when I became pregnant at the ripe old age of 41, I decided to move to Bangor just for the first couple of years of my little boy's life, just to be closer to grandparents. And also I'm a single mum, so grandparents are particularly important, I think, if you're lucky enough to have them. So I moved to Northern Ireland to have my son, thinking really that I might, that Northern Ireland's a bridge, just a place that I might be for a couple of years. So I had been looking after my son for about 1 year, and looking after my baby for 1 year, and thought it was about time that I came out of my nest and started to network a little bit. So Louise Gallagher had been in touch, and we met up for coffee, and it was literally just to say hello, I'm here, how's about you, as they say here. And Louise had just come on board A Bump Along the Way and as a producer. And on meeting me, I was telling her my story, which is that I'm a single mum in my 40s, and my son Otto was with me in the cafe. And she said, this is a bit strange, because I've just come on board this project and it's about a single mum in her 40s. So there was a little bit of a coincidence there, and so at that point Louise said, oh, maybe, it might be a good idea if you come in for an interview. So I did, and the following week I went in for an interview and came on board as the director on the project. And at this point, so that would have been in the May, and the shoot was in October. So from May through to I think August, there was still the last stage of script development to go. So I was involved in that part of the process, and then
And I saw that before I even watched the film, that it was a really, really strong female-led project, and you can just even tell by the reading of it that it is. I think, and it's so important to get women's voices behind. I know we're a lot more likely to hear women's stories now, but it's not always women telling them. And I think specifically something like this, a small, real story, it's so important to get it right, because it affects so many people, and it's so true to people's lives that you can tell instantly if something isn't authentic or has that concept of truth behind it, if that makes sense. But it was lovely to watch, and it was, you got the sense that everyone had sort of been in a similar situation when you were watching it, because it just felt true. It felt very comfortable to watch.
Good. That's good to know.
And I was just wondering as well, so you come on board the project, I presume you're workshopping the script for the last phase of it. What's the next step then? Do you guys start casting it first? Do you start storyboarding, working on visuals? How would you prep for a project like this?
Well, this on this film we ran a few workshops with Brona and Lola.
Yeah, Lola is amazing as well.
Yeah. They're both really, really amazing, and they work really well together. But we were lucky enough to be allowed to have a couple of days of workshops, and really, I worked closely with Brona and Lola really to try and set the tone of the piece. And I think so. There's so many scenes in the kitchen between mother and daughter And I felt that really it was really important to establish this relationship before going into the shoot. So it was a really valuable process. So we had a couple of days of workshops, and then really, I suppose, there was again very, very little time for prep, and every project that I've ever done, something I always recognise and think, why I've never ever given enough time as a director, because the majority of your time is taken up with meetings with HODs. Yeah. And that's just something that never really goes away. But on this one, it was very much lots of long meetings and trips up and down to Derry for recce's, to find locations. I suppose coming to Northern Ireland for the first time, I'm working with completely new crew. So that kind of adds an extra layer of time, because your meetings tend to be a bit longer because you're getting to know one another and working together for the first time. And then we just had a lot of trips to Derry. The producer Louise is from Derry. The majority of the crew are Derry based. And something that was particularly helpful, apart from the fact that we've got a Derry crew and the film's been shot in Derry, is the fact that Mark Macaulay, the DOP, is also from Derry, and he was really crucial to me as a way in to Derry.
And it's handy for recce's as well.
Yes,
can you pop down and have a little look at this instead of booking a whole day?
Yeah, he was enormously helpful, and especially when we had so little time. With Mark, so he knew the place like the back of his hand, and he could suggest places, and we just got there really quick. And also when looking for a location for the house, as there's so many scenes set in the kitchen, when we started looking for the hero house, discovered that a lot of the houses in Derry the kitchens are tiny, sort of galley style kitchens, and both myself and Mark the DOP really had a particular aesthetic and look in mind, and we didn't want the camera to be right up on top of our characters. So in the end, Mark's family gave us permission to shoot in his childhood home.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, which happened to be up for sale at the time, so it was lying empty. So we had this empty house that belonged to the DOP, which we were allowed to come in and recreate the house. Pamela and Allegra's house. So we were really, really lucky. It was that's kind of a Derry fairy moment.
So yeah, and it is nice to have your space, and what's really true is in life, everything happens in the kitchen. I think, it's such a central place to stories surrounding the home. Like it's kind of where most interactions happen. It's central to the story, and it's a lovely kind of visual metaphor for the Bronna's character's relationship with her mum as well. That you could tell it's never really done up. What was your kind of plan with the production design then?
Well, so Patrick Creighton, the production designer, and I probably had the longest meetings in the world, but it's a very, very important element of the film to me. I suppose I have come from quite a visual background, so although I didn't want the visuals to take over from the drama, that was certainly not what I wanted. I really did want to feel the history and the relationships in that home. So I wanted the house to feel like it had belonged to another generation, and really to feel the presence of Pamela's mother in the house. It's quite it's quite subtly there in the script, but as a backstory, Pamela had quite a difficult relationship with her mother, which, as we all know, our relationships with our parents and our families really do affect how we feel about ourselves and how we conduct ourselves in our lives. So, you know, the whole story about Pamela being bullied and maybe not having much self-esteem could well have come from her mother.
And her terrible relationships with her partner as well, so that makes perfect sense.
Yes, and also it's one of those, you know, things that you want to suggest. You don't want to spell out to people, but you want to suggest through the fabric of the film, and I suppose why do we end up in the relationships that we end up in? Why do we choose the relationships we end up in? Usually there's something in those relationships that we've seen before, or we felt before. So yes, so so in terms of the production design, we looked at a lot of I suppose houses in Derry from a certain period, and brought those together, and really Patrick and his team did a beautiful job in a very short space of time, and they built the kitchen into what would have been, I think, the dining room or living room. So that was built from scratch, and what the house gave me, which was really important, was it gave me the opportunity to see the kitchen from the corridor and from another room, so you could actually see through two doors into that space, and because I really wanted to sort of play with the relationships and the spatial tension between mother and daughter in the space. So again, it's one of these things that hopefully the audience aren't thinking about, but as a director, it was an important part of it, is to have that space to play with between the camera and our characters.
Yes, and there's a very kind of nice sound mix. So I think your music was by Die Hexen.
Mm-hmm.
That was the composition. Can you tell me a little bit about finding the right notes for that?
Yeah, well, Dee was recommended to me by Louise initially, and then I've got another friend here in Bangor called Hannah Peel, who's also a recording artist. So Dee came highly recommended to me through a few people, and I come from a musical background myself, and what was really great about working with Dee is on our first meeting she came round to my house, and at the time I was just surrounded by my son's toys, and still am, and we just started talking about the world in the film, and I had some reference notes of the style of music, but really what I wanted to, I basically left the house with a big bag full of my son's toys.
So he was delighted, was he?
Which he hasn't had back yet. He's a little bit older now, but yeah, I asked Dee, you know, we talked through the themes in the film and the relationships, and really the idea that Pamela has this being growing inside her belly, and the fact that this experience wasn't far off for me, and my son was around me and all his toys, kind of wanted to create a sort of musical motif for this little being inside of her, and that's where the toys, so the toys that could create some of the sounds, the samples to be used within the main track. So I think creatively speaking, Dee and I very straight away we talked the same language, I suppose, and so I gave her just a little exercise. Take Otto's toys, and with all the notes she had about the film and the relationships between the characters, I said to her, "Can you just create a soundtrack initially? Can you create a song for this film, like a main track, with all of these elements in it, and just be free and enjoy making it?" And that was the first brief that I gave Dee, and she went off with the toys, and she came back with the sort of main theme that you hear at the beginning of the film and at the end, and there's variations of that theme. And as soon as I heard it, I just thought she's completely on the right page for me, and I knew at that point that she had captured the world in a way which I was really happy with. So it was, and then we worked very closely on, together when we're laying down the other tracks to the film, and that's I naturally, I think, because I come from a musical choreographic background, I actually just find it quicker and easier and more immediate to work with the composer as much as possible. Even if it does their heads in, I tend to be working with that way.
I was going to say it's quite. That was kind of my next question. Well, I actually have a jump off question. I'm going to ask them both because otherwise I'll forget one, and I always regret it. So the first one is, she had to create two different worlds. So the first one was Pamela's and Allegra's, because we both inhabit their spaces equally, which is nice. There's not one protagonist in this. Like they both kind of share that light. So it's very different tonally, and you do get that sense, like Lola, when she's in school, it looks different, it feels different, even when you're watching it, sort of the pacing even feels a little bit different. And then Brona's world, you kind of, I think you get the sense of her sort of being a little bit trapped then when she's further in her pregnancy and she can't escape her house. She wants to go out with all her friends. So I don't know, I wanted to say kudos to that, but from an audio perspective, and those two different kind of sound mix worlds, were they different? And then the next bit was, so to get those scenes, there was a lot of the soundtrack obviously plays such a big role. Would you have had sort of the finished thing and edited into that, or would you have the composer compose over it? So they're my two.
Yeah, well, the first one would be, I always find and have found Peter and the Wolf enormously helpful in my life and in my work. But it was a sort of magic moment for me in primary school, listening to Peter and the Wolf, when I just sort of could visualise each character and each scene through a particular musical motif, through a musical instrument. And I know with this we did talk about the baby inside the stomach, the sort of internal world, and that far off treatment, the feeling of it sort of being heard through layers and from a distance. And then with Allegra's world, we sort of referenced a little bit the sort of like teenage movies, sort of American teenage movies. And with this, I had a sort of slight nod to Harl Hartley films, but there was definitely that sort of it's maybe quite subtle, but it was a definite and deliberate different treatment for Allegra's world, and then Pamela's, I think it became a mixture of the internal baby world, and that developing and becoming something else, but also then the raw piano, the actual piano rather than electric piano, being used to kind of really ground her and give her this weight and sense of something really real and emotional. So it makes me happy that you've picked up on on those three worlds, because it's something certainly like Dee and I we talked about and worked on, and in relationship to how I'd normally work, because sound, if you saw my earlier work is choreographic and very much poetic and musical, and so if my natural instinct is to approach work like that, so normally I would speak with my composer or sound designer before the edit and ask them to create something for me to bring into the edit, even if it's just textures or tones or something that just has a nod in the direction that it's going to ultimately end up being. So I normally come equipped with a bag full of sounds, and I find putting the sounds down in the edit, the feedback from that process to me is sort of making the work, and hopefully to the editor too, is enormously helpful. However, in this instance, we had the main theme, the track that Dee had created, but we didn't have enough time in the edit to accommodate all the sounds in the way that I would normally like to work, just because there was just so much to do in terms of story. So with the editor, with Helen Sheridan, really, really brilliant editor, and very lucky, I think, to have landed
again,
with her.
Another strong female role telling a female, like, you don't always get that many in one film.
No, and I think it's what I think. When I went for the job, I felt really determined to get it, because I thought this, apart from the fact that I had a lot in common with the story, I just felt that it really wouldn't be right at this time to tell the story with a male director. I don't like to say that, but I really felt determined to get the job. So yes, and bringing more female voices into the room on this project for me was very important, and I know for Louise as well, the producer.
She was saying that it was 50-50 nearly for cast and crew, and especially with crew it's hard to hit that.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, I think so. Part of it is, I suppose, part of it was luck, but also we didn't go out looking for female only. We didn't choose people for that reason, but I think it certainly brought something important to the film. So Helen actually works with her partner, Abbey the dog. So she brings Abbey into the edit suite, and so I think Abbey is a very important part of the process too, because she really helped sort of in moments when you're tricky bits in the edit, or story structure, things that aren't working. We could leave the room and go for a walk with Abbey, or just have a cuddle. So yeah, she was a nice addition to the process.
Best editing assistant ever, and I'm sure there's been great ones, but there is something about that. There's nothing that kind of stops creativity more than just getting a bit stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Yellowmoon is in Hollywood, which is right by the sea. So you not only have a dog to walk, but you've got the sea and the waves. So it's a really great place to work.
That's fabulous, because you do have all this association of when you're in an edit suite, you're just in a room in the dark, nearly looking at a screen. So it is nice to have that balance. Yeah,
and it just there's something I should mention as well. Is just that I think when we were at Yellowmoon, we had a few knocks on the door from people thinking that we weren't working, because I think Helen and I discovered that we've got quite a similar sense of humour, so there was a lot of laughter as well, which was also very helpful.
And it's great because you can see it right through the script as well, because there's lots of very funny moments in there. which is
Yes,
nice
yeah,
because it's kind
yeah.
of, there's elements of drama, there's a lot of humour. Brona herself is a really well realised character and she's hilarious. So tell me a little bit about how has this film been received? How has it gone down?
Speaking for we, I mean, I feel continuously pleasantly surprised and very happy and with how it's been received. From first screening in Belfast, that was I suppose that was just a gala screening, so it was public, but for the crew. So initially you think, oh well, that went down well because everyone's involved in it.
Yeah.
And then Galway, the audience response there was just really, really wonderful and really, just such a brilliant response. And then it continues, at TIFF in Toronto, the last screening especially, we stood outside the screening, some of the Brona and Lola and Louise and Paddy Courtney from the film were all out there as well, and Tess, the writer, importantly. And we all stood outside after the last screening, and as the audience came out, it was a bit like a wedding, with all these women hugging us, some in tears, and thanking us. A pregnant woman came up to me and said thank you for the story and for speaking honestly about your being a female director and a single mum. So it's been really, I don't know, it's just been lovely. I don't know how to talk
That's so
about
good.
it.
That's brilliant. I kind of want that response. It's a lovely warm film, so how did people respond to it? And it's affectionately, which is a lovely answer. And it's nice as well that you have a bit of an international audience, that it's not too local a story, that it really translates and resonates with people everywhere. So that's excellent.
Yes.
But thank you so much for chatting with us.
It's a pleasure.
Oh, look, thank you so much.
That's great.